Okay, welcome back. We've got a couple of pinch pots here that are good, they're ready to be assembled, they're ready to be put together. Almost. There's a couple of features, a couple of little things we have to do, but we're going to set those off to the side for a minute because I want you to see one that's not so good. It's always good to see an example of what not to do. Now this pinch pot's got major issues. It's got major issues because it's been squeezed too hard up at the top. Somebody took their fingers and pinched them together really hard. And see how that's flared? We can't get those to stick together. That's a major problem. We also have inconsistent wall thickness. So it's thick over here, it's thin over here. And those are problems because when the clay dries, it will dry faster where it's thinner, and that's very stressful on the clay. That's when we have problems with cracking and breaking and things falling apart. This one's bottom is also very thick. It's very heavy. They didn't do what I told them to do when I press in the corner and thin out the bottom. I'm going to do that though. I'm just going to press one side so you can see the difference. I'm about to cut this one in half. And I want you to see what it looks like when that's been done and when it hasn't. Okay, so let's cut this thing in half and critique it. We're using our wire tool. Okay, now when we pull this apart here, we see this is where I pressed to the corner, and we can see this wall thickness is nice and consistent. But here, that's no good. That's a huge mass of clay. Oh. So this is a huge mass of clay here. And then consistent walls here. But we also see that we have a lot of inconsistencies in the walls over on this side, this over here where this is turned under. And if we come over here and we cut this one in half again the other way, we can see some real inconsistencies in our wall thickness up here at the top. It's just not very well built. So this one, we'll keep these for parts. We can use this. It's not, the clay's not a loss. We can use those parts. This pinch pot, I've used my thumb to smooth out the inside. And when you're doing this, it's very important to always support the clay on the outside. If you're making an action on the clay, you need to have support on the other side. The idea is to compress the clay, not to stretch the clay. If I just push against the surface like this, trying to smooth it out, I'm going to have major problems because I'm going to be pushing the wall out. But if I support the clay with my hand like this, I can come back in with my thumb and I can really smooth the interior. And I'll demo that over here on this one. You can see it's not nearly as smooth or even. So I'm going to go ahead and just support it and smooth it. This gives you a smooth interior to your pot. I can move really fast. Again, I've done this quite a few times. I hope you guys can see. It's hard when you get all your hands in here to see what's going on. If you have fingernails, you have problems. Long fingernails should be cut before this project. Okay, now these two look good. The outsides are still a little bit rough, but that's not a problem. We're going to address that later. If we look at this, these are about the same size. So if we take them and put them together, they're going to match pretty well. Right now I have some gaps. So in order to deal with those gaps, I'm going to flatten these faces just a little bit by holding the pot with my hands, cradling it like this to support it, and I'm going to strike it just ever so gently on the table. And that's going to make a nice flat surface. And I'll do the other. And we're looking good. Those look really good now. Okay, so you're going to have it for a scoring tool. You're going to have a fork. And I make very few promises to my students, but I'll promise you, if you don't score this and add slip and then bond it together, they will fall apart. So now I'm going to score this surface with my fork, and I'm not afraid to really score it hard. We're going to put some aggressive marks in there. In the beginning, when you're working with clay, it's going to be messy. Sometimes students get frustrated because they think it should look perfect in the beginning. But clay is a very plastic material, and we can't put a lot of really extreme details into the clay until it firms up and loses a little bit of its plasticity. So now I'll just reach in, I'm going to wet my hand and touch this clay. I could also use a sponge just to dampen that. But I prefer just to put water on it. And then I'm going to score it again. And this is going to generate slip. You'll feel that it is much slicker the second time. Or much more slick. Slicker a word? I don't know. It's fun to say. Yeah, it's a coat. Okay, so now I'm going to take these two pots and we're going to put them together. And when I put them together, I really have to push. I also have to support the form. So my hands come over like this, and then I push it and give it a twist. We really want all those score marks to lock. Now if I've got something like this going on, I can just push it. I can take it apart, squeeze the body so it comes out to meet the wall. And I want to try to keep these fitting as close as we can. I'm really going to move around and try to get those to bond. Now I'm going to take my thumbs and mash that together as I move along. Not too hard pushing in. If I push in too hard, the walls will collapse. Okay, so now these two are bonded pretty well. They're not 100% yet. For our 100%, we're going to take a little bit of clay and we're going to squeeze it into a coil. We can roll it between our hands. It doesn't have to be perfect. We don't want to put too much on there. Something that's about the thickness of a pencil. If you really are super detail oriented, you can roll that a little bit. But we are going to mash it into the surface. If I roll it like that, it's pretty consistent. Now I can scratch the surface of that. And I can scratch my area where I'm joining it. Again, think about this is some slightly aggressive building. We don't have to worry about how pretty it is right now. Just a little bit of moisture. And now we're just we don't have to put any on this one. It's soft enough right now. It's plastic enough. I'm going to mash that into that seam. Now I'm not going to stick it down real hard because this is going to get bigger as I start to compress it. It might even come around and fill this gap. Now I'm going to take my thumb and I'm just going to take about half of it this way, and I could use my finger and do about half of the coil this way. You could also use a tool if you wanted to. If you wanted to use the back side of a fork. Or a knife. Whatever works best for you.
Good afternoon, Spartans, teachers and students. I would like to take this time to